This story still gives me chills whenever I think about it. A few years ago, my friends and I decided to go hiking in the hills near a small town we often visited for weekend getaways. The area was known for its beautiful trails, but there was one part of the hills that locals always warned us to avoid. The section with the hidden cave. No one ever talked much about it, just that it was better left alone. Naturally, being young and curious, we thought we'd check it out for ourselves. The weather was perfect, and we started the hike early. It was me, my friend Dan, and his cousin Luke. We were experienced hikers and figured it would be just another adventure. As we made our way through the hills, the conversation turned to the cave. Dan had done some research and found an old map that supposedly marked the cave's location. He was excited, eager to prove that the stories were just superstitions. I wasn't so sure, but I didn't want to be the one to chicken out. It took us a few hours, but eventually, we found a narrow, overgrown path leading off the main trail. According to Dan's map, this was it. The path was barely visible, hidden beneath years of leaves and dirt, as if nature itself was trying to cover it up. We pushed through the thick bushes, and after about half an hour, we reached the cave's entrance. It was smaller than I'd imagined, just a dark, jagged hole in the side of the hill. The opening looked unnatural, like it didn't belong there. There was something eerie about the way the shadows seemed to swallow the light, but we shrugged it off. None of us brought proper equipment, just flashlights and some snacks. Luke made a joke about it being the perfect spot for a horror movie, and we all laughed, trying to lighten the mood. But deep down, I think we all felt the same unease. We entered the cave, and immediately the air grew cold, far colder than it should have been for the season. The walls were damp, and the sound of dripping water echoed around us. The floor was uneven, and the deeper we went, the narrower the cave became. The further we walked, the more I had the feeling that we were trespassing somewhere we weren't meant to be. After about 10 minutes, we came to a large chamber, much bigger than the entrance would suggest. Our flashlights barely cut through the darkness, but we could make out strange markings on the walls. They didn't look like graffiti or anything made by modern hands. They were old, ancient even, and they seemed to pulse under the beam of our lights. "I think we should head back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dan and Luke just gave me a look, but before anyone could say anything, we heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, but definitely there. We all froze. "Did you hear that?" Dan whispered, his voice shaking. We stood in silence, listening. At first, there was nothing, just the sound of our own breathing. Then, again, the whisper. This time, it was clearer. It wasn't words we could understand, more like someone or something was trying to speak but couldn't form the sounds properly. Luke's face went pale. "Let's go," he said, already turning to leave. We started walking back the way we came, moving faster than before. But as we neared the cave entrance, it became clear that something was wrong. The path we had taken seemed different, like the cave had shifted. The narrow passage was now wider, but the air felt heavier, as if we were walking through thick fog. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered and went out. I smacked it against my hand, trying to get it to work, but it stayed dead. Dan's and Luke's lights flickered too, casting erratic shadows on the walls. In the dark, I could hear the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was just us, but the steps were uneven, slow, like someone else was in the cave with us. "Who's there?" Dan called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. There was no reply, just the sound of shuffling feet. And then, a low growl, almost like a human trying to imitate an animal. We didn't wait to find out what it was. We ran through the cave, stumbling over rocks and slipping on the wet floor, desperate to reach the entrance. My heart was pounding, my lungs burning, but I didn't dare stop. When we finally burst out of the cave, the sun was already setting. We didn't look back. We didn't say a word. We just kept running until we were back on the main trail. Later that night, we tried to talk about what happened, but none of us could make sense of it. We agreed never to go back and never to tell anyone. But something followed us out of that cave. For weeks afterward, we all had nightmares, always about the same thing. A shadowy figure standing at the mouth of the cave, watching, waiting. To this day, I can't explain what we experienced in that cave, but I'll never forget it. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear the whispers. What do you think really happened in that cave? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories.